Summer, 1943. A hardened German Africa Corps veteran stood in Camp Crossville, Tennessee, utterly bewildered by the brown, fizzing liquid in his hand. For the first time, he was tasting Coca-Cola. This wasn't a rare luxury. It cost a single nickel, the exact price an American child paid with their allowance. For this soldier and over 370,000 of his comrades, this simple soda was a sip of the impossible. It was their first lesson in a devastatingly effective, unorthodox campaign where the U.S. dismantled Nazi ideology not with lectures or threats, but with a shocking display of pure, unadulterated abundance. The brainwashing had begun, and it was delicious. The psychological demolition started the moment they surrendered in Tunisia. Expecting the starvation and brutality promised by Nazi propaganda, they were instead handed American K-Rations. To the GIs, this was standard, often complained about field food. To the Germans, who had subsisted on hardtack and synthetic coffee, it was a miraculous feast of crackers, processed cheese, candy bars, and real coffee. The systematic feeding of enemies with superior food began immediately, creating a deep, unsettling confusion about the true state of American resources. The shock therapy intensified aboard the Liberty ships carrying them across the Atlantic. These vessels, themselves monuments to American industry, built at a rate of one every 42 hours, became floating classrooms in abundance. Naval logs, like that of the USS General M.B. Stewart, recorded serving ice cream to the prisoners on July 4, 1943. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. A frozen dessert, served in the middle of a war zone, to the enemy. It was a weapon of mass distraction they never saw coming. When they reached American ports like Norfolk, the scale was incomprehensible. The naval base handled more tonnage in a day than major German ports managed in a week. But the real psychological warfare was on the trains inland. They weren't herded into boxcars but traveled in Pullman passenger coaches with dining cars serving full meals of fried chicken, pie, and coffee. This wasn't special treatment for show. It was just how America worked. The prison camps were the final, masterful stage of this re-education. They were not the grim fortresses of Nazi lore, but facilities with electric lights, hot showers, and most importantly, well-stocked canteens known as PX stores. Here, for a few cents of their camp wages, a German soldier could buy a Hershey bar, a bottle of Pepsi, or an ice cream sandwich. The American consumer economy, even in a POW camp, was open for business. The numbers, which the prisoners gradually learned, were a silent, screaming argument against everything they'd been told. Coca-Cola, 5 billion bottles produced in 1943 alone. Camp Hearn, Texas, consumed approximately 7,000 bottles weekly. Ice cream, served regularly in camps with refrigeration. Some larger camps ordered 50 to 100 gallons weekly. The U.S. military considered it essential for morale, for everyone, even captured enemies. Sugar. While German civilians were rationed to a few meager ounces a month, American POWs had unlimited access to sugar bowls in their mess halls. In one documented incident at Camp Aliceville, Alabama, kitchen staff discarded several hundred pounds of hardened sugar rather than go through the effort of salvaging it, a waste that horrified the German prisoners. The ultimate blow to their worldview came during the holidays. In 1943, German POWs sat down to a full, traditional Thanksgiving dinner: roast turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and pumpkin pie. The identical meal, served to American GIs fighting their comrades. That Christmas, American church groups and civilians, whose own sons were facing these men's brothers-in-arms on the front lines, delivered homemade cookies, candy, and gifts to the camps. This was a kindness and security so profound it shattered the Nazi myth of American decadence and moral weakness. How could a nation be on the verge of collapse when it could afford such generosity to its enemies? The final exam was the world outside the wire. Prisoners on work details saw American schoolchildren with access to hot lunch programs and fresh milk. They saw everyday diners where any factory worker or farmer could afford a meal that would be a luxury for most in Germany. They worked in orchards and canneries and witnessed the staggering scale and efficiency of American food production, including the casual disposal of perfectly good food for minor imperfections. This was not the struggling, feeble America Joseph Goebbels had described. This was an industrial and agricultural colossus so powerful it could wage a two-front global war and still have enough surplus to spoil its prisoners with ice cream and chocolate. By the time the war ended, the transformation was complete and visible. Many POWs had actually gained weight in captivity while their families starved in freedom. They returned to a destroyed homeland not just as defeated warriors, but as witnesses to a terrifying and awesome truth. Democracy wasn't weak. It was so inherently strong and productive it could afford to be kind. The men who arrived believing in German superiority and American decay left understanding that they had been conquered not just by armies, but by a system that created abundance for all, even its prisoners. The proof, in the end, was in the pudding, or more accurately, in the ice cream sundae and the bottle of ice-cold Coke. America's most ingenious and cheekiest weapon in World War II.